Louisiana, the land of jazz and festivals, now echoes with sorrowful cries from the shadows. Not the sound of music, but the muffled groans of those without a home, huddled on street corners along the cold banks of the Mississippi. They once had families, jobs, and dreams, but everything vanished with a cruel twist of fate. That sight feels like a knife cutting into the heart of anyone who witnesses it. This isn't just a story of poverty, it's a story of abandonment, when society turns its back and their cries become a true cry from hell. If you believe this is a story that needs to be heard, please like and subscribe to the channel so we can share the voices of those forgotten lives. Number 1. Shadows along the Mississippi. Along the mighty Mississippi River, once the lifeline of Southern culture, now linger the trembling figures of people huddled in makeshift tents, wrapped in thin, tattered blankets. The sound of waves against the shore is no longer a soothing melody, but a chilling whisper of nights without shelter. I see an elderly man sitting with his knees drawn up, his empty gaze fixed on the water. He was once a mechanic, once had a family. Now, all he has left is an old backpack and a few pieces of cardboard. Nearby, a young mother cradles her child, rocking it to sleep against the backdrop of train horns and howling wind. These people are not ghosts of society. They were once neighbors, co-workers, people who contributed to the community. And yet, a single twist of fate, the loss of a job, a crushing medical bill, or rent that suddenly soared beyond reach, pushed them to the edge. On this land of rich culture and abundant resources, how can Louisiana allow its own people to sleep by the river, forgotten in the shadows? Number 2. Not just in the cities, the spreading shadow homelessness in Louisiana is no longer confined to the corners of New Orleans or Baton Rouge. It has begun to spread like a shadow, creeping into rural areas and small towns. Along the dirt roads leading into Cajun country, on the highways connecting Lafayette and Shreveport, old beat-up cars have become reluctant shelters for entire families. In once peaceful towns, tents now rise on vacant lots next to churches or the small ball fields of local schools, scenes that have become disturbingly common. At riverside tourist spots, visitors no longer find only the sound of jazz or the aroma of signature gumbo, but also the sight of people curled up, clutching their few remaining belongings. Even in the tranquil highlands, where tourists once sought rest and escape, makeshift camps are appearing at the edges of the forests. Homelessness is no longer just the burden of big cities. It is like a widening crack, eating away at communities once thought to be immune. And as this shadow stretches across the state, it is no longer a social phenomenon, it has become a shared tragedy for all of Louisiana. Number 3. Two perspectives, compassion and contempt. In Louisiana, the conversation about homelessness stirs debate as lively as a steaming pot of gumbo. On one side, glasses are raised in defense of those cast onto the streets by misfortune, the loss of a job, illness, or homes swallowed up by skyrocketing rents. They call for compassion, for community responsibility, reminding everyone that in the land of jazz, harmony should extend to all. On the other side, there are sighs, and sometimes outright frustration. They see shabby tent camps, drug use in public parks, storefronts blocked by loitering groups, and view it all as a threat to their quality of life. That phrase echoes through city council meetings, as familiar as the sound of trumpets in the French Quarter. The truth is, these two viewpoints clash like drums and horns, sometimes discordant, sometimes blending. One side demands justice, the other craves safety. And Louisiana, amid its vibrant music, must somehow find a common rhythm, a balance where compassion is not drowned out by fear, and where social order does not become an excuse to abandon those left on the margins. Number 4. Numbers don't lie. Behind the moving stories lie cold, hard numbers, and numbers don't lie. According to the 2023 Point in Time survey, Louisiana recorded more than 4,800 homeless individuals in a single night. New Orleans alone carries nearly half that burden. The streets around the French Quarter and Central City are no longer just filled with tourists but lined with makeshift tents. Baton Rouge has seen a more than 25% increase over the past 3 years as families pushed out of their homes spill into parks and parking lots. Rural areas are no better. Small towns once considered peaceful now see more and more car homes, old sedans serving as temporary shelters for entire families. Others scrape by in cheap motels rented by the night, surviving on whatever little income they can still manage. These numbers are not just sterile data points. Each one represents a life suspended, a roof lost, a child doing homework in the backseat of a car. And as these figures continue to climb, they toll like a warning bell. This is no longer an isolated issue, but a full-scale crisis slowly consuming Louisiana, day by day. Number 5. Drugs and the downward spiral of hunger and cold can bring someone to their knees. Drugs are the rope that drags them further into the abyss. In Louisiana, fentanyl, an opioid 50 times stronger than heroin, has turned many neighborhoods into silent battlegrounds. In 2023, more than 1,100 opioid-related deaths were recorded, with 70% directly linked to fentanyl. Doses of naloxone are administered by first responders almost daily, especially in the makeshift camps around New Orleans. But that's not the whole picture. Marijuana legalization, once celebrated as progressive policy, has become a double-edged sword. For those already on shaky ground, cheap weed and high-potency THC provide an easy escape into numbness, erasing reality for a moment but pushing them deeper into despair. Many have begun mixing marijuana with fentanyl to dull both physical pain and emotional wounds, a combination that often leads to rapid destruction. Walk along downtown sidewalks and you'll see the stark contrast, a lively jazz band playing on one corner, and just a few steps away, a body curled up, fading beneath a toxic haze. This is no longer simply a story of substance abuse. It is a collective tragedy where policy and reality collide, leaving Louisiana with a raw, festering wound that refuses to heal. Number 6. Housing, the root of every tragedy. Every story of homelessness ultimately circles back to one point: the absence of a home. In Louisiana, rental prices have surged by more than 28% in just 4 years. In New Orleans alone, the average rent now exceeds $1,700 a month, a figure far out of reach for anyone surviving on minimum wage or social assistance. Meanwhile, the supply of affordable housing has collapsed. According to the NLIC, for every 100 extremely low-income households, only 31 suitable units are available. The result is that even full-time workers are living on the edge. Many families are forced to sleep in cars or string together nights in rundown motels, paying week to week. For those who can't keep up, sidewalks and public parks become their reluctant homes. Housing is not just four walls and a roof. It is the foundation that allows people to work, to heal, to raise children, and to hold on to their dignity. When that foundation crumbles, everything else falls apart with it. That's why Louisiana's housing crisis is not merely a real estate issue, it is the root of every human tragedy unfolding across the state, day after day. Number 7. The pandemic, the final blow. COVID-19 was not just a health storm, it was the final blow that severed the fragile lifeline holding thousands of Louisiana families together. Within just the first few weeks of lockdown, the state lost more than 200,000 jobs, mostly in tourism, food service, and hospitality, industries that sustained much of the low-wage workforce. When bars and restaurants shuttered, the already meager paychecks simply vanished. For a short time, the eviction moratorium acted like a life preserver. But when it expired at the end of 2021, a tidal wave of debt came crashing down. Countless families were forced out of their apartments after months of unpaid rent. Court records show eviction filings doubled compared to pre-pandemic levels, with New Orleans experiencing a surge that became a full-blown social tragedy. To make matters worse, shelters had to cut capacity due to distancing rules, while transitional housing programs stopped taking in new participants. Those already vulnerable were left stranded in the gap. The pandemic didn't create homelessness, but it shattered the already fragile roofs hanging over so many heads, turning thousands of Louisianans into outsiders in their own state after just one season of crisis. Number 8. Government efforts and dead ends. From 2020 to 2024, Louisiana's major cities, especially New Orleans, spent hundreds of millions of dollars on homelessness programs. Old hotels were converted into temporary housing, and safe outdoor spaces were set up with bathrooms, showers, and security. On paper, these looked like well-meaning steps forward, and in practice, they did help some people off the streets. But the reality outside is far harsher. Agencies remain fragmented, housing is handled by one department, mental health by another, and addiction treatment by yet another. Homeless individuals, already among the most vulnerable, are forced to navigate this heavy bureaucracy on their own just to access help. Meanwhile, the construction of affordable housing remains stuck in planning disputes, neighborhood opposition, and years-long approval processes. The government is not short on money, but it is short on speed and unity. The result is that big plans often arrive too late for the desperation unfolding on the sidewalks. The effort is real, but it runs into bureaucratic dead ends, widening the gap between policy and reality, while the people shivering on the streets are left waiting in vain. Number 9. A moral wound. There are moments in Louisiana that leave you breathless, not because of jazz music or the fiery taste of gumbo, but because of the cruel contrast staring you in the face. A child sits doing homework under a street lamp, while just a few blocks away, a luxury condo hosts a $1 million launch party. A man shivers under a torn blanket on a French Quarter sidewalk, right beside a line of tourists waiting to enter an upscale bar. This is not just poverty, it is a moral wound. When the government is willing to pour hundreds of millions into building a new stadium, yet shelters turn away dozens of people each night because they are over capacity, the issue is no longer about money. It is about priorities. When a community accepts that children grow up in tents under highway overpasses, we have failed the test of conscience. Louisiana is not lacking in resources, but it allows indifference to eat away at its humanity. And each day these images persist, they remain like an aching scar, a reminder that we are not only abandoning people, but abandoning our very sense of moral responsibility. Number 10. Complicit in silence. It isn't only the government or a broken system that created this tragedy. Every averted gaze, every hurried step past someone curled up on a street corner contributes to a silence of complicity. We tell ourselves, that's not my problem. But it is precisely this indifference that has turned homelessness into something normal in the eyes of Louisiana's communities. In Baton Rouge, a young mother and her child have slept in a car for months, just a few blocks away from where residents still celebrate the glitter of Mardi Gras. In New Orleans, tourists snap photos of colorful streets while, just beyond the frame, a man quietly gathers scraps of leftover food. This contrast is not an exception, it is daily life. It's easy to believe this is about them, the outsiders. But in truth, it takes only one shock, the loss of a job, a crushing medical bill, or a sudden rent hike, and anyone could tumble into the same abyss. And if we continue to remain silent, we are not only witnessing the collapse of homes, we are complicit in the collapse of our own compassion. Number 11. A cry from hell. Louisiana, the land of jazz and Mardi Gras, should never be scarred by the sight of people huddled beneath bridges, children growing up in tents, and families forced to turn their cars into homes. Yet this is the reality, a deep fracture in what was once the vibrant portrait of the American South. Homelessness here is not a disaster fallen from the sky. It is the product of misguided policies, bureaucratic delays, and prolonged indifference. Every day we look away, every time we dismiss it as normal, the wound deepens further. And we, through our silence, become part of the machinery that keeps this hell alive. The cries of those cast aside are not meaningless complaints. They are warnings that any one of us could become them after a single misfortune. If a society as rich in culture and resources as Louisiana allows its people to slowly die on the sidewalks, then what we are losing is not only shelter, but our very humanity. That is the cry from hell echoing from within us all.